A few weeks ago, one of you amigos, Adrian Massin 9149, asked us if we could do the aerodynamics of a Toyota Landcruiser 80 series because it was brick-shaped. So we wondered how different a Landcruiser was to a brick, not an 80 series, but a modern one, VXR. Sorry Adrian, we were really going to do the 80 series, but then we got distracted. Now this VXR is pretty interesting because there was a time when cars, including four-wheel drives, were trying to reduce how blocky their fronts were, so that the drag would then drop. But then the VXR for some reason decided to go the other way and make the front as blocky as possible. Compared to a regular brick, the Landcruiser is kind of like two bricks, one big one at the bottom and then one on top. One major drawcard of the Landcruiser is that it has some slightly sloped edges, but one major drawcard of the brick is that it's a brick. And I'm actually really impressed with the brick because given how sharp the front edges are, I expected a little more separation over the top and bottom. Here there is definitely a little flow separation over the bottom, but by about 40% from the leading edge, the flow reattaches, and over the top there is almost no separation here. Now, there is still low velocities over the brick, and that should definitely be bad for its aerodynamics, and likewise at the front, look at how much the flow just hits it and decelerates like crazy, and then there's a massive wake too. So the brick has some very brick-like aerodynamics, but some unexpectedly good ones too. Contrasting that with the Landcruiser, the front is very brick-like with all that flow deceleration too, and the front grille flow was modeled, and there is still all this deceleration. That creates a lot of high pressure, which is indicative of so much of the flow's energy being dumped into the car and pushing it backwards. I have to say that the underneath is on par with the brick because both have flow separation here, and maybe the Landcruiser is a little better because the flow reattaches sooner. That allows the underbody to work a little better, and we do get some low pressure here helping pull the car down. Over the hood, it's neck and neck with the brick because while the flow stays attached and very fast to begin with, the junction at the hood and the windshield has some recirculation. We don't see that kind of thing on the brick. The Landcruiser then inherits all this high pressure on the window, pushing it back. But cleverly, the windshield is slanted back a little, and that means that you can effectively have a greater frontal area, but less drag because you can see that the flow stays attached over the roof. As a downside, the pressure drops, and arguably, this is potentially worse for lift than if you were to just let the flow separate completely. One thing I really like is that the roof is completely flat, and that means we don't get much low pressure here compared to pretty much every other car. So the brick design is pretty good here. The diffuser on the Landcruiser is a little disappointing. I mean, we don't get any flow separation over the back of the brick, so the Landcruiser's diffuser performance is severely reduced. You can see how we do get a little bit of low pressure still, but the flow isn't kicked up at all, and that means we aren't getting as much downforce as we get on most other cars, and the wake is much larger, which comes with a large drag penalty. From on top, I'm quite impressed because we can now appreciate that while the front is really blocky, only about the center third decelerates the flow a lot. The flow on the outer edges gets redirected around the sides, and that helps reduce the high pressure here from insanely high to just moderately insanely high. Man, the flow around the wheels just bursts out and creates huge wakes. That is a strong indicator that the wheels produce a lot of drag, and that makes sense because this is a four-wheel drive and so the ground clearance is high. That results in the wheels being exposed a lot, and wheels are massive drag producers. I'm quite surprised how the rear edges of the Cruiser are rounded, but the flow refuses to stay attached over them still. As a result, the wake is massive, very much like a brick, so that rounding seems to be unimportant here. The good news is that the pressure in the wake here isn't really that low, so if you could reduce the super high pressure at the front, the drag would drop nicely. These simulations were done with OpenFoam, and if you want to learn OpenFoam, then take our courses here. We have a Christmas special on at the moment, which you might be interested in. From this drag isosurface orbit, you can really see just how much is being produced from the front wheels. It extends past the rear wheels and almost to the end of the car. By comparison, the rear wheels don't produce nearly that much. And really the rest of the car is pretty good until we get to the rear, where we obviously get a lot of drag from a very large rear face. Comparing that to a brick, it doesn't have any wheels, so it doesn't produce drag there. There are small pockets just behind the front edge, then there's only the rear that's producing any other drag. So there are effectively just 5 regions producing noticeable drag. If the edges were rounded, the brick might be a real contender. How does the drag of each object compare? The Landcruiser has a drag coefficient of 0.43, which isn't great by modern car standards, but the brick is 0.82, which is eye-wateringly bad. But when it comes to the lift coefficient, the brick strikes back with one of just 0.037 compared to 0.042 for the Cruiser. In terms of kilos, that's 10.1 kilos of lift, which is quite a bit higher than most other cars out there. So the brick might have a bad drag coefficient, but its lift is relatively impressive. So keep your noses clean and peace out amigos.